right, a big hello to everyone joining us today at the LA Blockchain Summit. In the next half hour, we'll be able to hear directly from a US lawmaker on the current state of crypto regulation in the country and what it might look like in the future. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Congressman Ted Budd, representative for North Carolina's 13th Congressional District and member of the House Financial Services Committee. He has been an outspoken proponent for blockchain technology and has advocated specifically for clearing up tax laws as they apply to digital assets. So Congressman, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us today, and it's a pleasure to be chatting with you.
Thanks. It's great to be with you. Thanks, Sandali.
All right, let's get right to it. So this is such an exciting time for blockchain right now. There's so much going on. I feel like no 2 days are the same anymore. On top of innovations like stablecoin and the late craze around DeFi, governments around the world have started paying attention to the space, which I feel like it's adding legitimacy to something that people have viewed with a lot of skepticism so far. So I was wondering, at what point did you look at blockchain tech and crypto and think, wait, this is important and we need to take it seriously?
Yeah, so I think this is really the inevitability of digitalization of commerce. I mean, when you had the rise of the internet in the early 1990s, and then you figured out how to transact, and then there was the question of how do you pay for it, and the Elon Musk that we see now, and we got to think about his roots and the PayPal 8, with Peter Thiel, and really they figured out how to do commerce on the internet. Now, I'm paying my kids, and they're paying me back over Venmo, but it has to get more and more digital as our lives become more and more digital. So cryptocurrency is one way of doing this. It brings into question the store of value, and the question for us here in Washington D.C. is what involvement, if any, are regulators, and if this is the future, how do we be involved without and help maintain or grow American competitiveness around the world, and not hamper a growing new sector of the economy? So that's really the quandary that we always find ourselves in, is how do we? I don't think we have to spur it on. I think it's going to be our new lives. It's going to be the future. But we want to think about guardrails and how do we protect our constituents and our citizens as this is the new future.
Absolutely. And I remember a couple of years back, you said that the development of blockchain technology is a matter of national security. And I feel like with everything that's happened since then, maybe you feel more strongly about that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in the past 6 months during COVID, having our lives have really become a lot more digital. So there's more transactions. You see more prime vans moving around. You see more e-commerce happening. So everything's now online. And so when we look to cryptocurrency, and major transactions are now happening over the various forms of crypto, how do we keep people safe and not taken advantage of? So we definitely want to have some regulations. We definitely want to have some safeguards in there. We know that there are bad actors out there, whether it's a state actor, if it's North Korea, if it's Iran, those who typically are opposed to the United States. How do we make sure that they're not the leaders in this? We can't be passive as a country. We want to set up proactive guardrails and be out in front, not to spur it. The industry will take care of itself as far as spurring this, and innovators out there around the world will spur this, but we want America to be a safe place for this, and to make sure that predominantly good actors are in this space, and that we have a way to push off and to deal with the bad actors. We don't want China's worldview to be the dominant player here. We think the stronger America is, the better it is for everyone else. And so we want the best of our country to be reflected in the policies and in the technology that interweaves with that policy.
Absolutely. And recently, actually, the president of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, said that Europe has sort of fallen behind in this global race to create a digital payments ecosystem first. And China has, many agree, taken the lead in this. How do you think the US is doing, and how important is it for US lawmakers to seriously look at a digital dollar or a central bank digital currency?
Well, I think Lagarde was right in that, and Europe, especially the leaders, when you look at especially France and Germany and Estonia, we want to make sure. I mean, they tend to be a digital leader as well. You know, they punch above their weight as one of the Baltic countries. But I want to make sure that the United States is out in front on this. I think we are doing good. But the great thing about the United States is also can be the bad thing when it comes to innovation. We're not a top-down country. China is. The Chinese Communist Party can dictate technologies. They can move massive amounts of dollars at will with relative speed and unity. But you got to realize what they're pushing out there. That may not be the best worldview or the best technology or be in the best interest of the 7+ billion people around the world that are moving towards engagement with crypto. But the United States, we have a relatively open society and a free society. We want to preserve that. And we want to make sure, again, to push out the bad actors and those who seek to control. Because really, this is not about control, but we want to make sure that we optimize the technology and make sure we keep the bad actors out of there, and that it's the countries that are high control like China aren't reflected in the technology. So we have to get out there, Sandali. I just think that we can't be passive in this.
And how do you feel you as lawmakers can ensure that innovators come to America and innovation happens here and not somewhere else? What are you doing and what can you do to make that happen?
Yeah, regulatory environments around the world either attract or repel investment. You know, I don't think it's about necessarily having a grant-driven where the United States will grant provisions for a particular technology, maybe, but I think we just need to have a very free and robust type of thinking here, and I think the U.S. is unmatched in that. And so, one of the great things I've seen the last 2 years in the Financial Services Committee is we started out in 2017 when I came into office, and about 2/3 of the members would scratch their heads, and this is on both sides of the aisle, and they would say, well, what's crypto? And we've even had some people say it was like, I don't even know, it was like a nuclear threat. And I'm like, no, that's not the way you think about it. So I think some of this, and you've probably heard me make comments on this, I think some of it's generational. It's not left or right, Democrat or Republican always. It's generational, and realizing this is not a threat, but it could be if we're not involved. If we don't set up the proper regulatory structure, we could allow the Chinese worldview to dominate our future transactions. And we don't really want that. So I think maintaining what's best of America, and that is a robust, free-thinking, innovative society, is best for citizens around the world, best for our country, and best for cryptocurrency.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And staying on regulation, I mean, this is like a super fast moving space and a new technology that's still sort of evolving. And I feel like governments are constantly having to play this catch-up game to ensure oversight. And there are so many things to consider at once. It's not like our traditional financial system where we started with paper money and then slowly transitioned into online banking and cashless payments. Everything's happening at once. You have to consider cybersecurity and the internet, cybercrime, and you have to also define these new financial instruments and figure out how to tax them. So in the landscape of all these like different things you have to prioritize, you've been kind of focusing on taxes specifically. I was wondering why focus on taxes over something else like security, and why is that important, I think?
Yeah, well, we do need both. I don't think it's you focus on one or the other. I think you have the right technological provisions in there where it's safe and where it's secure and people actually trust it. Because if people don't trust it as a store of value, then it's done, or it moves elsewhere in a more trustworthy environment in another country, and I don't want that. But you also don't want to have, like I said, a regulatory environment can be attractive or it can repel. industries, so can the tax structure. And we don't want people to have a disadvantage. And when you look at a transaction that could be taxed at 40 cents, that's 40%, that's the erosion of wealth right there. Or I'm not saying necessarily for a wealthy person, because this is highly democratized here. You just don't want anybody, if you have $100 in crypto and every time you trade or you convert, you're losing 40% of the time. It approaches zero rather quickly. So we can't have that. We have to make sure we have a normal, regular purchase type of tax structure here that's compatible, and it doesn't repel the industry to other countries.
Absolutely. And how far do you think in the future we have a comprehensive tax framework for crypto?
Yeah, taxes, have been bipartisan in the past. I'm talking about decades ago. But when you look at a big tax bill like the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of December of 2017, I mean, that was all one party. I'm a Republican. It happened to be a Republican bill. 80 to 90% of people out there, about 90% of the people got a tax cut, took more home. So while we're grateful for that, or at least I am, I think we have to realize, again, this needs to be a very bipartisan thing. And we need to realize, let's make sure this industry stays here in the US and let's see what we can do. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of animosity right now, which is one of the refreshing things, Sandali, about this is it doesn't cut across party, or it does cut across party lines. It's not divisive, and maybe generationally. And so we just need to make sure that we work on this in a bipartisan way in front of the Ways and Means Committee. And again, there are some very tenured members on that committee. We want to make sure that they understand what cryptocurrency is, and regardless of your party, that we have a good structure for it here in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. And staying on that, how do you envision crypto being sort of regulated in the United States? So far, there's more of a sort of state-by-state basis, where New York has its own bit license, and recently Hawaii launched its own regulatory sandbox. And most recently, the CSBS sort of tried to consolidate crypto compliance so that companies can operate in other states without having to apply for their own license. And how do you envision the future? Do you see a federal framework, or the continuation of like a state-by-state, very specific compliance framework for crypto and blockchain?
That's a great question. It kind of calls into question how our country is structured, Sandali. While on most things, I'm very pro states' rights. I'm from North Carolina. I'm for them making decisions. And when I look at the insurance industry, which is under the umbrella of the Financial Services Committee, we want to maintain our 50-state regulatory body, or regulatory structure. I think that's the way we need to go. But with this, because we look at digitalization, meaning more global, I think we need to come together as a country and all of our territories and all of our states to have one structure like Switzerland. Now, we're very different than Switzerland, but I think we need to have a unified, preemptive, federal, light touch regulation that, again, makes it, and that's another thing, it's not just taxation, it's not just regulatory, it's also how confusing is it to deal with. And if we're hard to deal with as a country, because going from North to South Carolina or to Virginia or to Montana is different, and something that's digital, that's really tough. And I think people would just look elsewhere for more unified places to do business. So we got to be simple, and I think a preemptive federal regulatory structure would be very helpful here. And no, please don't ask me if I have that ready to go. I don't.
Oh, no. Not yet. I was just wondering, how do you feel about if you're going for a state by state? Like you said, you want states to maintain their sort of autonomy over this sector. How do you feel about the bit license? Do you feel like that could be something that could be scaled to other states, or?
Yeah, that's not an area of my expertise. Glad to look at that and see. There's going to be a lot of influences. We're going to look at, some of the more advanced states in crypto and say, what have they already done? I don't think we need to invent the wheel there. A lot of time it's about finding really good wheels. If it's bit license, if it's a state that has a regulatory structure, if it's a country that has already done something, if it's Hong Kong or Estonia, we want to look around the world and not reinvent the wheel. Well, this will be, what we put together will be distinctly American and will help our American competitiveness. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. What we do is need to go out there and assemble the best parts of wheels that already exist.
And I'm staying on innovation. I know that you're all for everything sort of being spearheaded in the United States, and there's already so much happening right now. And the pandemic sort of really drove this sustained discussion about how blockchain can be applied, not just to improve financial services and financial inclusion, but also to kind of streamline national registries and supply chains and all these kinds of things. So I was wondering, what area of innovation are you watching closely, especially in the context of how it might improve American lives?
I think one, this right here, essentially, I didn't even ask where you're located today. So I'm in Washington, D.C. Yesterday morning, I was in North Carolina. You're someplace else. So I essentially look at this as not just a communication system. We're using some technology. Some people use WebEx. This is Zoom. There's dozens of platforms. Some we probably haven't even heard of that we haven't even used yet. But this is essentially a transportation system. I mean, you didn't have to come to Washington and I didn't have to go meet you. What a great technology. And essentially this is a digital platform that we're using right now to be with you eventually in Los Angeles. So this is very exciting. So I look at communication that substitutes for transportation. That's one. I look at transactions, and really what you want to do is, look, it removes the friction. So it de-frictions transportation by substituting communication. How do we take the friction out of transactions? I mean, for years we've used a plastic rectangular card to take friction away because we don't always have the right cash. Cash is messy. COVID, people don't really want to touch other stuff. They're hesitant. There's not always enough hand sanitizer around, and you don't know what to do with cash. And by the way, is the Treasury even making coins now? People ask, they don't have the right change. So, I look at removing friction from transactions, and when you have a distributed ledger, you're not only going to take it out of the financial part, you're going to take friction out of the information gathering part. And people can lock down their own personal records and their histories and all those, whether it's medical or whether it's legal. Somebody wants to go buy a house. I mean, it is reams of paperwork, even if it's done online. And if you apply at one bank versus another for a car loan or a home loan or a consumer loan, why don't you just have, and it's all the same information, it's arranged differently. But if you had all that locked down in a distributed ledger somewhere, you could just unlock it temporarily and then share it and then relock it. I just think there's tremendous ways to take friction out of transactions. And there's just a lot of transactions that are dormant, they're stalled because people don't want the hassle. They've got a million things to do and they can't put up with the friction of everyday life. And so they just don't. They don't start a business. They don't buy that home, move out an apartment into a home. They don't upgrade their car that's safer and more efficient. But if we take that friction out, I think it'll help people's lives improve, and I think it'll grow our economy too.
Absolutely, and it's something that we've been noticing as well when we're reporting in other countries that they're using crypto and blockchain as transfer mechanisms to, get money into the country if you're working abroad. And it's sort of streamlined the sector in such an incredible way. And I mean, it's only forward from here. And I have to ask on that note, what do you feel about DeFi right now and the craze?
Absolutely. So I have, you build a lot of relationships in this business. And so there's traditional financial institutions that I talk about. Then you have DeFi. Of course, you've had fintech has been a term we've been talking about the last 4 or 5 years. Look, I'm pro all this, so I understand. And what you're seeing now is traditional institutions realizing they don't want the world to get away from them, so they're investing in fintech and now DeFi. This is yet one more way to take friction out of the system and to allow the underbanked and unbanked people into the system. So I think if it pushes access and if it moves the bottom rung of a ladder down a little lower so that those who have the toughest time in life can get their foot on that ladder to make their lives a little better, then I'm all for it. I don't think that some of the tools that the more sophisticated individuals and wealthier individuals have access to should be just for them. I don't think you need to force banks to move it down to everybody. I don't think that. But I think technology naturally evolves. You think about 100 years ago, who had a car? It was the wealthiest. And now, who's got a car? Almost everyone that needs one. Who had a television at first? Now almost everyone. Who had a computer? Who had a smartphone at first? But now it moves its way inevitably to become better, faster, and cheaper, and more accessible. And that's one of the things that DeFi does for banking. And I think that's helpful to all involved.
Thank you. And
Sure.
your optimism is great. Oh, it's nice to hear this coming from someone like you, because.
And I'm a Republican, but I'm not angry about it.
I was thinking about it. But thank you so much for all your incredible insights. And I feel like you look at this space with optimism and for its potential, not where it's at right now. I mean, there are a lot of problems we need to solve and things we need to iron out before it gets to a place where we can, call it mass adoption. But thank you so much. And is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, what we need to hear is from industry. So make sure that those that are hearing this webcast and that you actually reach out to our offices and other offices. Reach out to your member of Congress, whoever your member is, wherever you are in the country, and share with them why it's important. Come see us here. Be involved when travel is normalized again, or a Zoom call, whatever it takes. Stay in touch with us because we don't want to be out of touch with what's actually happening. And you're the front line of this industry. And so we want to be in touch. We want regulators to work with industry so that we do build these guardrails that I've been talking about, but we don't make them blockades. We don't want to make a blockade when we intended to make a guardrail. So stay in touch, keep us informed with what you need and what you don't need. And we're here to be helpful. At least most of us are.
Awesome. Thank you so much once again for your time and joining us today. This has been an incredible little discussion about regulation. Have a wonderful day.
You as well. Thanks so much.